3 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, 1,200 kilometers into hostile territory defended by integrated air defense network that military analysts considered most sophisticated outside NATO. 60 high-value targets destroyed in single night through precision strikes that enemy forces didn't detect until weapons were already impacting. Mission planners estimated 90% probability of losing at least one aircraft during operation this deep into defended airspace. All 3 B-2s returned without damage, without ever being detected, without enemy even realizing they were under attack until destruction was already occurring. What those 3 aircraft accomplished in 8 hours rewrote strategic bombing doctrine and demonstrated capability that changes calculations about what targets are vulnerable to precision strike, regardless of how deeply enemy hides them behind defensive layers. But the reason why B-2s penetrated further into hostile territory than any previous stealth operation has nothing to do with aircraft capabilities or better weapons. It was one pre-mission intelligence operation that identified vulnerability in enemy air defense network that nobody knew existed until exploitation revealed it. And understanding that vulnerability requires waiting for revelation that transforms everything about strategic bombing and air defense vulnerability. Just weeks ago, Strategic Command authorized unprecedented, deep penetration strike against enemy military infrastructure located in heartland territory that conventional wisdom said was untouchable by air power without accepting catastrophic losses. Target set included command bunkers, weapons production facilities, strategic communications nodes, and logistics hubs spread across 600 kilometers of defended territory. Every target was prioritized as strategically significant. But collectively, they'd never been struck because reaching them required penetrating air defense network with overlapping radar coverage, multiple SAM systems with different engagement envelopes, fighter bases positioned for rapid interception, and terrain that limited low-altitude ingress options. Previous analysis concluded striking these targets would require either massive campaign, accepting significant aircraft losses, or employing standoff weapons from outside defended airspace with reduced effectiveness and higher ammunition expenditure. Strategic Command decided neither option was acceptable and authorized B-2 mission that would test whether stealth technology truly enables deep strike capability that Doctrine claims exists but has never been operationally demonstrated at this scale and depth. Welcome to AndreyNavyReport, where air and naval power analysis meets operational reality. Planning phase. Mission planners had 6 weeks to prepare operation against targets defended by air defense network specifically designed to detect and engage stealth aircraft. Enemy hadn't developed air defense system around assumption stealth wouldn't challenge them. They'd built systems specifically to counter stealth threats using techniques and technologies intended to overcome low observable characteristics. Defensive planning included VHF radar networks that detect stealth better than traditional X-band systems, overlapping coverage, eliminating gaps stealth aircraft could exploit, passive sensors detecting aircraft through infrared and other non-radar signatures, and tactical doctrine emphasizing early warning and rapid response to any indication of penetration. B-2 mission planners weren't confronting obsolete air defense operating according to outdated doctrine. They were challenging modern integrated system operated by professional force that understood stealth threat and prepared specifically to counter it. Week 1 planning. Intelligence analysts conducted comprehensive assessment of enemy air defense network searching for vulnerabilities that mission could exploit. Standard approach examines radar coverage gaps where stealth aircraft could penetrate without detection. But enemy network had been designed specifically to eliminate such gaps through overlapping sensors and redundant coverage. Planners couldn't identify traditional penetration corridors that stealth missions normally exploit. That forced different analytical approach. Instead of finding gaps in coverage, intelligence examined network architecture, searching for systemic vulnerabilities in how sensors communicated and coordinated. That analysis revealed something unexpected about enemy air defense integration that created vulnerability enemy planners apparently didn't recognize existed. Week 3 Planning. Vulnerability identified involved enemy networks' reliance on centralized command and control, coordinating defensive response across entire system. Individual radar sites and SAM batteries were effective independently, but operated most efficiently when coordinated through central battle management system that allocated threats to optimal defensive systems based on geometry and capability. That centralization created single point of failure. If central coordination was disrupted, defensive systems would remain operational, but coordination would degrade significantly, making collective defense less effective than some of individual systems. Intelligence analysts recognize that disrupting centralized coordination could create windows where stealth aircraft could penetrate areas that would normally be defended too effectively for safe passage. Mission planners incorporated that insight into operational concept. Precede bomber penetration with cyber and electronic warfare operations disrupting enemy battle management long enough for B-2s to transit defended zones before coordination could be restored. Week 5 Planning. Route planning incorporated cyber warfare timeline, ensuring B-2s would reach critical defended areas exactly when enemy coordination would be most degraded from cyber operations. Timing was critical. Cyber effects would be temporary before enemy operators recognized problem and implemented backup procedures. B-2s needed to be positioned to exploit disruption window, then withdraw before defenses could be fully restored. Navigation planning calculated precise routes that optimized transit through defended zones when coordination disruption would be maximum, while avoiding areas where individual defensive systems could still engage effectively even without central coordination. Flight profile balanced altitude for optimal stealth performance against terrain masking and threat timelines. Weapon employment planning allocated precision munitions to 60 targets, ensuring complete mission success even if some targets required multiple weapons due to hardening or deception. Hour 0. Cyber warfare operation initiated against enemy air defense network. Not broad attack attempting to disable entire system. That would be detected immediately and trigger defensive responses that would negate advantage. Surgical cyber operation targeting specific nodes in battle management system that coordinated defensive allocation without destroying individual radar or SAM capabilities. Enemy operators noticed degraded coordination, but couldn't immediately determine whether problems were cyber attack, equipment malfunction, or communications issue. That ambiguity delayed effective response while operators troubleshot problems instead of assuming they were under attack. Delay was exactly what mission planning required. Window of confusion, where defenses remained technically operational, but coordination was sufficiently degraded that B-2s could penetrate without triggering optimally coordinated response. Hour 2. 3 B-2s entered hostile airspace. Not from direction, enemy expected based on likely approach routes from American bases. Complex routing included segments over international waters and third-party airspace that placed bombers approaching defended zones from angles enemy defense planning considered unlikely based on typical stealth mission profiles. Unexpected approach direction forced enemy to rely on defensive systems optimally positioned for different threat axes. Combined with degraded coordination from cyber effects, B-2s penetrated initial defensive layers without triggering detection or engagement. Enemy radar operators monitoring sectors where B-2s actually approached had degraded coordination, making it difficult to distinguish stealth returns from ground clutter and anomalies that systems normally filtered automatically. Hour 4. B-2s reached deepest penetration point, 1,200 kilometers inside hostile territory. No previous stealth mission had operated this far into defended airspace against peer-level air defense network. Mission planners had estimated this was point of maximum risk, where detection probability was highest and escape options were most limited. But cyber effects combined with optimal routing meant enemy defenses remained essentially blind to bomber presence even at maximum penetration depth. B-2 crews began weapons employment against first target set, command bunkers, and strategic communications nodes that coordinated enemy military operations across entire theater. Weapons were GPS-guided, precision munitions programmed to impact simultaneously across multiple targets, creating maximum disruption in minimum time. Employment time window was measured in minutes. B-2s needed to complete strikes and begin withdrawal before enemy recognized they were under attack and before cyber effects degraded enough that defensive coordination improved. Hour 4, minute 30. First weapons impacted targets. Enemy recognized immediately they were under precision strike, but couldn't determine attack. Source: initial assumption was cruise missile attack from standoff range. Standard response for precision strikes against strategic targets. Air defense focused on detecting missiles and potential launching aircraft operating outside defended zones. Nobody immediately suspected stealth bombers were already hundreds of kilometers inside defended territory, because Doctrine said deep penetration was too risky against integrated air defense. That misidentification of threat provided additional minutes before enemy realized actual nature of attack. B-2s continued striking targets while enemy defensive attention focused on wrong threat vector, searching for cruise missiles or standoff aircraft that didn't exist. Hour 5. Second target set engaged. Enemy began recognizing pattern of strikes suggested something more than standoff attacks. Weapons were impacting targets across wide geographic area too rapidly for cruise missiles launched from single location. Defensive commanders reassessed situation, recognizing they might be facing penetrating aircraft. Despite Doctrine suggesting stealth bombers wouldn't risk such deep intrusion, air defense shifted from outer zone cruise missile defense to internal search, attempting to locate aircraft that might be operating inside defended territory. But cyber effects on coordination meant defensive systems couldn't efficiently search areas where radar coverage existed. But without coordinated cueing about where to focus search, operators faced overwhelming amount of data to process without clear indication where actual threats existed. Hour 6. Third target set engaged. B-2s completing weapons employment against 60 targets across 600 kilometers of defended territory. strike rate exceeded what enemy thought possible for 3 aircraft. Conventional wisdom said precision bombing required sustained operations over multiple nights, allowing defenders to adapt and improve effectiveness. Completing entire target set in single night through simultaneous employment across wide area was capability enemy defensive planning hadn't fully considered, because it required multiple aircraft operating independently deep inside defended space. That distributed operations concept, enabled by stealth and precision, weapons achieved effects typically requiring much larger force operating over extended time. By completing mission in single night, B-2s denied enemy opportunity to adapt defenses based on initial attacks. Hour 7. All weapons employed. B-2s began withdrawal. Enemy air defense was now fully alert, searching for penetrating aircraft. Cyber effects on coordination were degrading as enemy operators implemented backup procedures and workarounds restoring some defensive coordination capability. But B-2s were already withdrawing through routes planned to avoid areas where restored coordination would be most effective. Withdrawal routing differed from ingress routes, ensuring enemy defenses positioned to intercept. Expected withdrawal weren't optimally positioned for actual routes B-2s used. Mission planning had calculated multiple withdrawal options, ensuring bombers could select routes that remained safest based on real-time assessment of enemy defensive response as it developed. Hour 8. B-2s exited hostile airspace. Enemy-mounted interception attempts, including fighter launches from multiple bases attempting to find and engage withdrawing bombers. But without precise positioning data, fighters searched large areas where B-2s might be operating without achieving detection. Stealth characteristics made visual detection essentially impossible at night. Radar detection required getting close enough that B-2 low observable features were overcome by proximity, but fighters didn't know where to search closely. Fighter operations continued for hours after B-2s had already withdrawn, demonstrating enemy recognition. They'd been penetrated deeply, but inability to locate or engage penetrating aircraft even when actively searching. Mission achieved complete tactical surprise. Maintaining that surprise even after attacks revealed American presence somewhere inside defended territory. Now for revelation that reframes entire operation. Remember that cyber warfare operation disrupting enemy coordination that enabled B-2 penetration. That cyber operation wasn't developed specifically for this mission. It was exploitation of vulnerability that intelligence had identified months earlier through penetration of enemy procurement networks, revealing details about air defense architecture, including critical dependencies on centralized battle management. American cyber operators had prepared exploitation capability against that vulnerability, but held it in reserve, waiting for operation where employment would be strategically justified. This B-2 mission provided that justification. Target set was sufficiently important that employing cyber capability that might be detected and patched afterward was assessed as acceptable risk. Enemy air defense vulnerability wasn't accident or oversight. It was known weakness that Americans deliberately exploited only when strategic value justified revealing that intelligence penetration existed. Think about implications for strategic operations security. Enemy had built sophisticated air defense network specifically designed to counter stealth threats. But architecture had vulnerability created by centralized coordination that designers apparently didn't recognize could be exploited through cyber warfare. American intelligence identified that vulnerability through penetration of procurement and development information that revealed network architecture in detail. Having that knowledge, Americans prepared cyber exploitation but preserved it until opportunity existed, where employment was strategically justified despite potentially revealing intelligence sources. B-2 mission represented that opportunity. 60 high-value targets justified using cyber capability even if employment revealed vulnerability to enemy who could then patch it. For enemy forces, this operation revealed catastrophic intelligence compromise. Not just that Americans penetrated air defense network, but that Americans understood network architecture well enough to identify and exploit systemic vulnerability. Penetration of procurement networks, giving Americans detailed information about defensive systems, represents intelligence failure with strategic implications beyond single bombing mission. Every military system enemy develops might be compromised through similar intelligence penetration, giving Americans knowledge of vulnerabilities that can be exploited operationally. That uncertainty affects confidence in all defensive systems, since enemy cannot know what Americans know about systems through intelligence penetration. For American military, this operation validated strategic bombing concepts that critics doubted were operationally viable. 60 targets destroyed in a single night through deep penetration that Doctrine said was too risky represents revolution in strategic strike capability. Previous Doctrine required sustained campaigns, accepting aircraft losses to achieve effects. Single-night mission with 0 losses. Achieving comprehensive effects changes calculations about what's possible through strategic bombing. Future operations can target previously untouchable assets because deep stealth penetration, combined with cyber warfare, enables reaching targets regardless of defensive sophistication when intelligence identifies exploitable vulnerabilities. The broader lesson applies across all military operations. Technical capabilities like stealth are multiplied when combined with intelligence that identifies defensive vulnerabilities and cyber warfare that can exploit those vulnerabilities during operations. B-2 stealth alone wouldn't have enabled mission success against sophisticated air defense. Stealth combined with intelligence-derived cyber exploitation created conditions where stealth could operate safely deep in defended territory. Integration of intelligence, cyber, and kinetic operations is what enables revolutionary capabilities that individual technologies cannot achieve independently. This is modern warfare, where information dominance enables physical dominance through exploitation of vulnerabilities opponents don't know they have. Which factor dominated this mission? A. B-2 stealth technology making detection impossible. B. Precision weapons enabling efficient target destruction. C. Cyber exploitation of intelligence identified vulnerability, creating coordination disruption that enabled penetration. The answer is C. Stealth was essential. Precision weapons mattered, but mission success depended on cyber warfare, exploiting vulnerability that intelligence had identified through penetration of enemy procurement networks. Without that cyber operation disrupting defensive coordination, B-2s likely couldn't have penetrated safely 1,200 kilometers into defended territory regardless of stealth capabilities. Intelligence identifying vulnerability and cyber operations exploiting it created conditions where stealth and precision could achieve effects that technology alone couldn't accomplish. Can adversaries prevent such intelligence penetrations and cyber exploitations? Not easily. Modern military systems require complex development and procurement involving many organizations and personnel. Each node in development and acquisition creates potential penetration point for determined intelligence operations. American intelligence organizations have resources and capabilities most nations cannot match. Defending against penetration requires security measures that often conflict with efficiency in development and fielding new capabilities. Even perfect technical security cannot prevent human compromise through recruitment or other methods. Air defense network that was penetrated through intelligence compromise had been designed by competent professionals, but somewhere in development or deployment process, information was compromised that gave Americans knowledge of architecture, enabling them to identify and prepare exploitation of systemic vulnerability. What does this mean for future strategic bombing? Deep penetration missions against sophisticated defenses become viable when intelligence and cyber operations create conditions for safe transit. Targets previously considered too well defended to strike without accepting losses become vulnerable when offensive cyber can degrade defensive coordination during attack. Future doctrine will increasingly emphasize integration of stealth, intelligence, and cyber rather than treating them as separate capabilities. This B-2 mission demonstrated that integration enabling effects that individual capabilities cannot achieve. Strategic bombing remains relevant and decisive when conducted through operations that combine all elements of information and kinetic warfare into a comprehensive approach that overwhelms defenses through exploitation of vulnerabilities rather than simple superiority in platforms or weapons. This mission proved that strategic targets anywhere can be struck when intelligence identifies defensive vulnerabilities, and cyber warfare can exploit those vulnerabilities during operations. 3 B-2s destroyed 60 targets, 1,200 kilometers inside defended territory in single night without losses, because cyber operation exploiting intelligence identified vulnerability created conditions where stealth could safely penetrate and precision weapons could effectively engage. Future adversaries cannot assume any target is safe from precision strikes.